Hello, and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On today's show, we're going to dig into a topic that gets talked about a lot, but often in really vague or overly casual ways, especially on social media. Today, I'm going to talk to you all about love bombing and how that actually shows up in the lifestyle, what goes on, what are the drivers behind it. Now, as always, before we get into all of this, I want to thank you all for tuning in, helping the show continue to grow, to reach a further audience. Now, whether you're new here or a longtime listener, I really do appreciate you all tuning in, sending me your questions, asking things, and engaging with this content. And if you do find this episode helpful, I'd love for you to take a moment, hit the follow button, subscribe, like, rate my show 5 stars, or even share it with someone who might need to hear it. That way, my show can continue to grow. I can keep it off being paid, right? And if you'd like to support the work that I'm doing here, there is a donate button in my show's description. Every little bit helps keep the show moving forward. All right, let's get into it here. Today, we're going to talk about something that really can feel like falling in love, but ends like a psychological ambush. Love bombing. And what is it really? Why does it work? And how does it show up, especially in kink or power exchange dynamics? Most importantly, what can you find, or what can you do if you find yourself on the receiving end of it? And let me be clear, I'm not demonizing affection, because affection is healthy. It's not about calling everyone who's enthusiastic or expressive a manipulator. This is about recognizing when someone is using attention or praise or even romance as a way to gain control or fast-track emotional dependence. Now, whether you're in the kink world or not, love bombing works on people for a reason. So let's unpack what really actually is, why it happens, how to spot it, and what to do if you're in it. Now, first, what actually is love bombing? So let's start by clearly defining it. Love bombing is when someone floods you with affection, praise, attention, gifts, grand romantic gestures early on in a relationship, before trust, time, or even mutual understanding have had a chance to develop. It's not just about being affectionate. It's about using intensity to create an emotional dependency really quickly. The goal here, whether conscious or even unconscious, is to bypass healthy pacing. When someone showers you with connection before there's any real relationship groundwork, it creates a dynamic that feels deeply intimate, but really isn't rooted in anything real. And that's where manipulation comes in. Love bombing isn't about giving. It's about gaining something. Your trust, your commitment, your vulnerability, before you even had a chance to decide if this person has earned it. That's why this behavior is really effective and it's very dangerous. It doesn't look like a red flag on the surface. Most people don't question early affection, especially if they've been hurt or neglected or even made to feel invisible in the past. So if you've longed to be chosen or seen or even prioritized by someone, love bombing can feel like you're finally being valued, you're finally being seen. And let me be really clear. Not all fast-moving relationships are toxic. And not everyone who comes on strong is trying to manipulate you. But the difference is, healthy people don't punish you for asking for space, slowing things down, or even needing clarity. Love bombing becomes a red flag when someone uses emotional intensity to steamroll pace, they skip consent, or they pressure you into some sort of deep attachment before you're ready. Now, in practice, it might look like someone is declaring you are their soulmate on a date, or texting constantly, or needing round-the-clock access to your time and attention. They might even send really expensive, extravagant gifts that create this whole feeling of debt and obligation. That actually is a psychological tactic. There is some roots there. I'm not going to really go into that today, but if we look at kink spaces, now this can be a trickier spot because intensity is often part of our dynamics. When someone says, I've never connected with anyone this way before, even before you all start to get into negotiations or talk about maybe permanent power exchange rules, before any type of trust is earned, you're not being flattered, you're being cornered. And it might feel like romance, but it's not love. Love requires time and choice and stability. Love bombing is about fast emotional leverage. It's not real connection. It's an attempt to lock you in before you've had time to listen to your gut. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of it, you'll know how quickly it turns from euphoric to confusing. Now, what started as validation turns quickly into pressure. What felt like safety starts to feel like surveillance. So when we talk about love bombing, we're talking about performance of intimacy without any substance. And that performance is often calculated, if not by intent, then by dysfunction. So that's what it is. It's not just affection, it's a tool of control, whether that control is conscious or not. And next, I want to really start talking about why people do it, both the people who love bomb and the people who find themselves affected by it. So now that we know what love bombing is, let's talk about the part that gets overlooked most often. Why do people do it? Right? And this is where this started today. This whole segment here, this whole episode was brought to me by actually a couple people. I want to acknowledge real quickly. This question came from actually two different people in France about the same thing and somebody in Ireland. They were all kind of sharing, no, they're not doing it to each other, but they're all kind of lamenting over the same process. So let's really unpack this a bit more. It's important here to be really honest. Not everyone who love bombs is a predator. So I want to be clear on that. That doesn't mean it's harmless, but the motivations behind it can vary. Not all of them are calculated or even cruel. In some cases, love bombing is maybe even a trauma response. People who struggle with anxious attachment, maybe abandonment fears or emotionally instability, they're dealing with emotional instability, may use intensity as a way that makes them feel safe. They might not even realize why they're doing it. Now, what I'm not doing is I'm not excusing this behavior. I'm trying to help you understand it. I never excuse. I help us gain the understanding of why certain behaviors happen. Now, it's not a complete reason why they're doing it. This is just one of potentially many. Now, under the surface, there is a desperate push here. If I give you everything right now, maybe you won't leave, right? So for these individuals, love bombing isn't so much about control as it is maybe even about survival. It's a frantic attempt to secure connection before they even know if the relationship is healthy. Then there's the more intentional version. Some people love bomb because they want control. It's not about building a relationship. It's about gaining influence. Narcissistic traits here often show up. The person wants admiration, dependency, or even obedience, and they know intensity gets results. Love bombing becomes a tool for grooming. They're flooding the other person with attention until they get too emotionally hooked to question things. Once that dependency is built, the script flips. The affection stops, the rules change, and you're left chasing the version of them they gave you at the beginning. That kind of person doesn't fall in love with you. They fall in love with your reaction to them. And then there's the third category here, and this is the rare one that's rarely talked about, learned behavior. Now, think about what we are sold in the media. Romance novels don't teach us to be slow or even formulate stable connections. They teach us grand gestures, whirlwind love, instant chemistry. So when someone has grown up with that model or hasn't learned what real intimacy looks like, they may believe that intensity is proof of love. So that covers why people do it, but we also need to talk about why it works. For the person on the receiving end, love bombing doesn't feel like manipulation at first. It feels being wanted. It feels like being seen and being valued. And if you grew up in an environment where attention was inconsistent, where love had to be earned, or it was conditional, or where you were ignored unless you performed, love bombing can feel like you're finally seen, finally being chosen. And that's what makes it so hard to recognize. Your nervous system might register the high intensity as connection, when really it's familiarity. It's matching the chaos or unpredictability you've already lived through, just dressed up in praise instead of criticism. Now, this becomes the moment where a lot of people beat themselves up. How did I not see it? Or why did I fall for that? But love bombing plays on basic human needs, belonging, validation, security. It's not a personal flaw to respond to that. It's human. The problem is when you attach intensity to it, you stop asking important questions like, is this pace right for me? Is this even mutual? Do I even like this person, or do I just like how they make me feel? And that's the psychological trap of love bombing. It hijacks your system. It pulls you into something that feels safe when in reality it's built on emotional adrenaline. So the why actually matters here. Because if we don't understand the function of love bombing from both sides, we miss the opportunity to spot it early, or to even catch ourselves when we're the ones rushing connection out of fear, right? And I want to start talking about now where and how it actually shows up. Some of these day-to-day signs, the little moments that may, feel sweet, but when you look closer, they start to raise some questions. So now that we've kind of broken this all down, what love bombing is, why people do it, let's talk about what it actually looks like in real time, because it's not always easy to spot, especially in the beginning. It can feel flattering, intimate, even romantic. But once you learn the patterns, they start to stand out like a sore thumb. The first and the most common one is the over-the-top compliments and the future planning way too early. You just started talking, right? And suddenly the most amazing person you ever met, that's you, right? They say things like, I can see myself building a life with you after, a date or two. There's a constant theme of, this is it. They've never connected with anyone like this before. You're their soulmate, their perfect match, their everything. Now, on the surface, it does sound romantic, but a healthy connection does take time, right? When someone starts future building before you even know each other's, middle name, it's not connection, it's projection. Another sign? Constant, unrelenting contact. The person love bombing will often flood you with messages, text, DMs, emails, phone calls. They expect fast replies. And if you don't respond quickly, you're going to get a guilt trip. Did I do something wrong? I just really miss you. Why aren't you responding to me? In the beginning, this does feel good. It feels like attention, but over time, it starts to feel like surveillance, like you're being emotionally monitored. That's not affection, that's control, and it's draining. Now, gifts and service are another angle. And let me just say this clearly. Gift giving isn't bad. Acts of service aren't bad, but when someone gives you something expensive or elaborate or deeply personal before there's any real relationship, it creates an emotional debt. Suddenly you feel like you can't say no, or you owe them something back. And I see this in my work with some clients. I've actually worked on this with some people. Regardless that I've worked with somebody who was doing this. And even though we pointed out the patterns, it was too hard for them to stop, right? And if you can't stop doing something, then it starts becoming part of your dating makeup. And then when you start to question why you're always alone, it's because other people see this pattern and they don't want to engage, right? We'll get into that here in a little bit. But all of this is when it crosses a line, when a gesture looks like a function for leverage. You'll also hear a lot of statements like, I've never felt this way about anyone before. I've never trusted someone this fast. You're the only person who understands me. These aren't lies, right? But they're often used to speed up intimacy. If you don't know each other well, those statements aren't signs of deep connection. They're signs of someone trying to create maybe some artificial depth to keep you emotionally engaged. Now, I'm not saying that some of these comments aren't true, but we tend not to trust people within 12 hours, right? Especially if we don't know them. We don't know anything about them. Even if you're 25 or 35, somebody's got an entire history, decades of history that we don't know about. So how are you going to initiate trust in such a short amount of time? It is okay to pace yourself. There's nothing wrong with it, right? But let's talk about how this shows up inside of our kink or power exchange spaces in the lifestyle. Love bombing can look like someone skipping maybe negotiation, going straight to declarations of ownership. You're mine. I've been waiting for someone like you, or let's talk about collaring before you've even established any type of basic boundaries, right? We're skipping the things to build what a meaningful, long-lasting relationship is. Now, it might also show up as a, instant protocol or high-intensity role expectations. You're suddenly expected to perform like you're in a long-term dynamic without the safety net of actual trust. Or worse here, it gets framed as, if you trust me, you'll do this. Now, that's a form of manipulation. That's not dominance. That's not submission. That's emotional coercion wrapped in role play. And that's a huge red flag. These signs aren't about judging affection. They're about identifying pressure. And the key question to ask yourself here is, do I feel safe and grounded in this connection, or am I constantly trying to keep up with their pace? Now, if the answer is the second one, you're not in a relationship. You're in a performance, and it's being directed by somebody else, right? Now, maybe you've been listening so far, and you're like, okay, some of this sounds familiar, Chris, but, I'm not sure if it applies to me. Well, that's fair. Love bombing can be incredibly subtle, especially in an early stage of a relationship. But here are some signs you might already be in one, even if everything else feels good on the surface. At first, you feel overwhelmed, even if you can't explain why. The person seems kind, they seem generous, maybe thoughtful, but it's all happening so fast that your nervous system is struggling to catch up. You feel emotionally activated, maybe even euphoric, but also feel off, right? The balance isn't there. And that off-balance feeling, that's not chemistry, that's your body telling you this is too much, too fast. Second, you're adjusting your boundaries faster than you normally would. Now, here's where you start making exceptions, right? You let them in emotionally or physically quicker than you planned. You skip your usual self-checks. You rationalize behaviors that you'd normally question. And here's the thing. It doesn't feel like coercion. It feels like connection. But the truth is you're moving at their pace, not yours. Third, you're kind of skipping your own pacing just to match them. You might find yourself spending more time with them than you intended, responding to messages immediately so they don't feel ignored, shifting your schedule for them, letting go of routines for them. It feels like closeness, but it's kind of actually more like erasure. You're no longer responding to your internal clock. In lifestyle dynamics for us, this can look like a submissive going into high protocol before any type of trust is built, or a dominant pushing expectations without any discussions of limits. Roles kick in, but the relationship underneath, it really hasn't formed yet. Now, fourth, there's pressure, spoken or unspoken, to return the same level of emotional investment. They might even say, something like, I love you, and it's really early. And all of a sudden, you feel suddenly stuck. If you don't say it back, will they pull away? If you hesitate, does that make you cold? You feel like you owe them the same energy, even if you're not there yet. And the last, but maybe the most important thing, your gut is speaking, but you're not listening. You feel something's off, you know it's too fast, but you don't question it. Maybe you feel guilty, maybe you don't want to ruin the moment. Maybe you're scared that, to be seen as difficult, or, you're just afraid they're going to leave. But ignoring your gut is how love bombing works. It's designed to drown that out, right? To quiet the voices inside that's asking, is this actually real? If you've been there before, or if you're in it right now, this isn't about blame, it's about awareness. So take a moment, ask yourself, have I started to lose my own voice in the middle of all of this intensity, right? Love bombing is effective because it hijacks your emotional needs and packs them away. Then, it gives them back to you in a way that looks like intimacy when it's not. And the longer it goes on, the harder it is to untangle. So, which is why recognizing it while it still feels good is the hardest, but the most important part. So how does this all maybe affect us inside of the lifestyle world, right? So if we're looking how this might play out in certain, TPE style relationships, why it can be even harder to recognize when the dynamic involves DS or MS roles. Now, for many people, especially submissives, being claimed early, it can feel thrilling. When somebody uses honorifics, talks about ownership, or slips into protocol language quickly, it can hit those deep emotional targets, being chosen, being wanted, being finally seen. You might hear things like, oh, I've been looking for someone like you, or you were made for me, right? If you've never really been allowed to take up space in your submission, that kind of attention can feel like home. But here's the real issue with all of this. When that claiming happens before any negotiation, without any time to build trust or a foundation, or without a shared understanding of all of these things, it's not care, it's control. You're being ushered into obedience before you've had a chance to ask yourself, do I even trust this person? Do I feel emotionally safe? Are my limits being heard, or are they being bypassed under the banner of devotion? Now, when those early declarations are intense, it creates like a pressure cooker for us. You don't want to disappoint. You don't want to pull back. You feel emotionally locked in before your body or boundaries have had a chance to weigh in. Sometimes you wake up, 3 weeks later in a role you never meant to accept. You didn't say yes to a total power exchange, but now you're serving it daily, answering to rules you never agreed upon, or calling someone master out of obligation, not alignment. And that's what love bombing does. It locks people into roles emotionally long before they've consented to them in practice. And because the structure looks like a dynamic, it becomes harder to admit you've no longer, sure you even want to be there. Now, I want to flip this around for a minute, because dominants aren't immune to love bombing either, right? I've seen this on the other side. You might meet a sub who praises you endlessly, calls you ma'am or sir, or daddy or mistress immediately, and they offer their deep vulnerability. They show you quick obedience, and it can feel affirming, especially if you're someone who takes your role seriously and you value leadership. But fast submission isn't the same as earned submission, right? You are earning each other's respect. You're building a foundation of trust. That's got to go both ways. If someone's going to give up their control and somebody else is going to take it, that has to be earned, and it's done over time. Now, what you're often seeing isn't trust, it's performance. If someone is rushing into a role because they're craving approval or even connection, and if you're not careful, you can get hooked by all this fantasy. Finally, someone who gets it. Finally, someone who wants this as much as I do. But the red flag is on this. Has any of this been built on an actual conversation? Are our values aligned? Have we gone through any type of vetting, mutual agreement, built a contract? Have we discussed what we want? Or has it all just felt good enough that I didn't even stop to check? And this is where the dynamic starts to unravel. Emotional dysregulation. One day the submissive is wide open, loving, devoted, and highly attuned. The next day they're withdrawn, they're reactive. Or the dom, they might be warm and attentive and then cold and silent. But because the intensity was so high at the start, these emotional shifts get normalized as part of the dynamic. They're not. They're a symptom of something that's, been moving too fast without structure to hold it. And when love bombing happens in kink spaces, it short circuits the very things that make power exchange sustainable. Informed consent, trust, pacing, and emotional safety. Without those, DS becomes performative, and that performance can be, spiral into emotional obligation. If I pull back now, they'll say I'm not really submissive. If I ask, to slow things down, I'm going to lose their respect. They're just passionate. Isn't that what this is supposed to feel like? And the danger here is that coercion gets rebranded as romance. Consent gets wrapped in fantasy. And leaving starts to feel like a betrayal. But the truth is, if the intensity of a dynamic is outpacing the clarity of the relationship underneath it, you're not in a power exchange. You're in a pressure exchange. Healthy DS is rooted in mutual recognition. And that means both people are allowed to pause, check in, and say, hey, this is moving a little bit too fast. Because no one should have this, to sacrifice safety to prove their devotion. So, Chris, what can we do about it? Well, what you can actually do if you realize you're in the middle of this, or if you're starting to feel like something isn't sitting right, the first and the most important step slow it down. You don't need to justify that. You don't need a big reason. If the pace feels too fast, that alone is just enough. A healthy partner, kink or vanilla, is going to respect your pace. They're not going to try to guilt you, punish you, or sell you on why, what you have is different. If someone is resisting slowing it down or reacts like, you're threatening the connection just by asking for space, that's not romance, that's regulation. Now, second, check your motivation. Ask yourself, am I responding from a place of genuine connection, or am I trying to hold on to a feeling they have created? Am I moving forward because I want to, or because I don't want to lose them? Third, pull in an outside voice. Try to find somebody maybe a little bit neutral, right? Talk to someone who is not caught up in the intensity with you, a friend, a mentor, a therapist, a family member, someone who can reflect on what maybe they've seen without being inside the emotional tornado. Often people on the outside can spot what we can't. That sudden shift in your priorities, the way you stopped using your own voice, the pressure that's creeping in behind all the praise. Fourth, you got to reclaim your pace. If you realize you've skipped steps, boundaries, negotiations, emotional clarity, you can walk it back. You're allowed to pause and say, you know what, I know I agreed to some of this, but I need to reevaluate where I'm at. That doesn't make you flaky. It makes you self-aware. And finally, if you need to exit, you can. Even if you said yes, even if it felt good at first, even if you already gave them a title or took one yourself, you're allowed to leave dynamics that are moving too fast, ignoring your needs, or even flooding you with emotional obligation. And let me be really clear on this. Leaving isn't betrayal, it's projection. You're not responsible for managing someone else's feelings about your boundaries, especially, when they've made it hard for you to set them in the first place. Love bombing works because it feels like connection, but real connection allows for hesitation. Real dominance doesn't fear boundaries. Real submission doesn't require surrendering your voice to prove you're devoted. So if something inside of you has been whispering, you know what, this is too much, you don't need to wait, for it to start hurting before you listen. Slowing down is not sabotage, it's clarity. And it might be the very thing that saves you from mistaking emotional pressure for intimacy. I want to reiterate something. Intensity isn't intimacy. And love isn't something that you just get swept into. It's something you build. Real connection takes time and reflection and mutual choice. When someone floods you with attention and praise or promises before you even had a chance to breathe, that's not passion, it's strategy. Even if it doesn't start with bad intentions, it can still lead to emotional confusion, pressure, and loss of self. Now, if you've been pulled into something fast, you're not foolish. You're human. And there's no shame in being affected by something designed to feel good. That's the point. It is good until it isn't. So I'm going to leave you all with a question today I want you to sit with. Right? I want you to think about what we talked about. Maybe you're reflecting on something. Maybe you're questioning a relationship you left last year or 5 months ago or years ago and you're still stuck. Are you being chosen or are you being chased? Right? That's the question I need you all to sit with today, to think about, to even reflect on. Right? Because sometimes that's going to bring you a lot more clarity. I want to thank you for the 3 people who sent me very similar stories. I'm hoping this adds some clarity for you, right? I would say thank you in French, but I actually can't remember the term. And, well, from the person over in the UK, thank you for this question. I appreciate it. These questions affect us in all sorts of relationships, and I think that's why this is really important to talk about. Because we end up turning self-blame. We do a lot of things that make us feel bad to continue it moving forward. Before I close out today, a couple of things. I apologize for a lot of the noise. Road is really busy near me today. I record and do all of this myself. Somebody asked me this recently. I edit my own show. I do my own show. I try to reduce the noise as much as possible. Try to take some more out and post-edit. So I apologize if it's a little noisy. I can't control that. I am very sorry. Second, something else I want to mention. I'm now cracked over a lot of people on social media, on Fetlife alone. I just hit 7,000 followers. I want to say thank you for that. I'm truly amazed, and that people, a lot of what I write or say resonates with a lot of you, and thank you for that. But I want to say a couple of things because I've actually opened up my AMA there, and I do get a lot of questions. Every month I respond to probably thousands of comments and questions in email, not only in my practice, but then to people on social media. And if you know me, or if you follow me, or if you've interacted with me, you know this is true. But I need to say this. Please understand that in my role, I cannot give you sometimes the advice you want. Second, I am not versed on every form of therapy. I am a trauma-specific therapist. I deal with attachment styles. I'm psychoanalytical, right? I have it on my bio. If you ask me questions that are out of my scope, I'm probably not going to be able to answer those for you. It's not because I don't want to. It's because I can't. It's not the work I do, right? Or if you ask me really vague things, I don't know. It's not because I'm trying to be evasive. It's because it's not what I do, and I'm busy. But please also understand something else. For a lot of us who work in this field, we give a lot of our time and our energy, and it can get draining. And most recently, I've had to block somebody that I knew, acquaintance, somebody I knew for a very long time. But because they trauma dumped on me, and that's not my space to hold. That's not that space for any therapist to hold, whether they tell you or not what they do for a living, right? It's not their space to hold that for you. So please don't do that. And please keep in mind, we are people too. We do a lot for these communities in and out of the lifestyle, right? We're there. And some of us aren't open like I am. It's why when I go to spaces, though, I go to a space and it's private. No, I don't discuss my private life or where I go, because I need time to just be me outside of my position or my job, right? So please just respect that a little bit. I'm not saying you all don't, but sometimes the questions come in, and I just kind of wanted to clarify that today. Couple of other things. So recently I was on the Authentically Kinky podcast. I don't know when the episode's going to come out. Catsuit's going to let me know. I'm assuming it's probably going to be a future episode of his. When it does come out, I'll let you all know. It was a really fun interview with me. I'm going to try to bring him on the show. My apologies to Red Leather Woman. I got to bring her on. To my apologies to the other gentleman in the Middle East. It's time for me, guys. I'm busy, and it's very hard for me to coordinate schedules with people all over the world. Sometimes it's not always easy, right? A couple of other things too. No, I'm not going to get into politics because everybody has a view, and I'll tell you what, everybody's entitled to their view or opinion. Whether I agree with you or disagree with you, that's neither here nor there. It doesn't really matter. Yes, I have a voice. No, I'm not here to use it for that. My voice is here to strictly talk about psychology and BDSM and the world that we inhabit, and relationships and trauma. It is hard. I'm a veteran, and I've worked in a lot of other fields, and I want to talk about those things, but that's not why I'm here. I just want to talk about this space. So if you keep your questions coming in, I'm really happy to answer them, right? That's all I'm going to really kind of say on that front. Even if sometimes it really gets to me, I kind of keep that to myself, right? Please also don't ask me or send me questions. They're a little bit odd for me, like favorite foods or kind of car I drive. That's a little bit personal stuff. I'm just going to leave it this way. If you ask me something too personal and you don't get a response from me, I'm not going to answer it. That's invading my privacy, and I'm a private person and I need separation. So sorry, I'm not going to share that stuff with people. However, it's not a slight. I just, private life, separation, guys. I do have a book out. It's called Tangled Desires, the intersection between BDSM and psychology, wherever you can get your, ebooks at, or if you want a paperback version. Yes, I dog myself about my own book. Look, I wrote my own book. I edited my own book, published my own book. It was really difficult. I put way too much into it, meaning I dumped a ton of psychology into it. It's a little repetitive. It is what it is. It's why I lowered the price of it. If it helps you, great. There are some people it's benefited. There are others who've told me it sucked. And that's all right. You know what? It is what it is. I'm still an author, still done it. I might write another one. We'll see. I've learned a lot. Another question I got asked, and I want to address this real quickly, is why do I talk about trauma so much? Well, it's because I am a trauma-specific therapist, and it's what I do for a living. So a lot of that world resonates with me. Plus, I look to other people who inspire me or who are the top leaders in the field, and I follow their work. So it's why I talk about it so much, or I can write about it so much. But I've tried to do it in a way that will resonate with everybody. At least it gives you the psychology without being overly verbose or jargon heavy. I don't do that. That's not how I normally speak. I have a great set of colleagues, but we don't sit around and talk in that language. We're people too. I do have a couple of other stuff coming up on the pipeline. Not really ready to share all that stuff with you yet. Also, I want to let you guys know, maybe this week, but if not, definitely next week, I am going to drop another resource guide for the community, the global community. So do remember, I offer on my website, free of charge, free to download, worksheets ranging from dynamics to other things that you could need inside of the lifestyle that might help you. About negotiations, you can go take a look. There's a link on the show's description, www.enhanced-mind.com. You can go there, go to the resources tab. They're all free of charge. I charge nothing for them. Why? Because I want to help you all, right? That's what I believe we need to do if we are helping the community grow. It's not about me profiting from it. If I wanted to, I'd probably close it all off, but that's not why I'm doing that. I do that so you all can have some resources. So if you need them, go get them. They're there, right? Building personal protocols, vetting worksheets, partner dynamic check-ins, consent, right? That's just a few. There's even stuff there on anxiety if you want. It's all free of charge. I don't charge anything for it. So please go get that. I am on YouTube. So people are starting to ask me. The channel's called The Kink Perspective. You can still find all of these episodes there. Get uploaded to Spotify, right? Keep your questions coming in, right? I kind of like doing questions from people around the world. Yes, I will translate. If you could just tell me what your language is, makes it a little easier for me, right? I just don't like hitting the auto translate. I like to know where the question's coming from, right? I am going to try to get there's a question that came to me from Croatia. I finally figured it out. Thank you. I will try to get to that in the future. If not, at least in a writing. But I do hear you all. I see you all. And I promise I try to get to each one of you. Right? Let me know what you thought about today's episode. If you've been not a victim, but you've experienced love bombing in a relationship, right? How it affected you. How did you get out? Right? Were you the person who did it and started to realize you were doing it and, you stopped your behavior? Right? Let's keep the conversation going on the socials. Right? You can follow me also on Substack. I'm there. Until next time, everybody, be safe, stay kinky.